This is a Bible story. That's right, story. From the Gospel of John, chapter 9. It's about a man. The story doesn't give him a name, so we'll call him Ralph. And it doesn't say how old he is, so today we'll make him 24. In the story, the important thing about Ralph is that he is blind and that he's been that way forever. Now, 2,000 years ago, life was super hard for blind people like Ralph. You couldn't work. You couldn't go to school. You pretty much were condemned to a life of begging, and that was his life. But Ralph was curious. He wanted to know all about the world around him, and his senses were sharp because he was missing one. His little sister had helped him explore his tiny world over the years. Every morning he woke up to a beautiful song. His sister explained that it was a stellar jay, an animal, a kind of bird. And she said, "It's mostly blue, brother." He didn't understand anything about birds, and he certainly didn't understand blue, but he knew the song, and he loved it a lot. Over the years, she taught him the difference between the sound of camels' feet and the feet of donkeys as they passed by their tiny house, and he imagined what they might look like. She explained what they did and how they were beasts of burden. He knew the sound of soldiers as they went by, and he knew the salesmen, and he knew the call to prayer. All of these things were sounds to him. But he didn't have an image of them in his brain, what they might look like. Really, up until now, it was just a big swirl of light in his head. And he lived like that for 24 years. If he was sad about it, he never said he was. One day while he was begging, he felt some people close because he had learned to. They smell like foreigners, pilgrims maybe, to Jerusalem. He knew that they were talking about him, sensed it, and he could hear. One of them said, "Somebody must have done something terrible for him to be like that." Him? Did he do something wrong? Or maybe his parents did? Because you see, in that day, people believed that folks suffered because God was punishing them. But another, softer voice said, "This is not a shame or a punishment." The soft voice said, "This, brothers and sisters, is an opportunity." And then he felt the voice close to him, and he heard the voice whisper, "Friend, trust me." Then he thought he heard him spit. Really? Yeah, spit. And then the voice again, softer and closer, and he said, "Trust me." So Ralph did. Then he felt the sting of something in his eye, and he smelled what smelled like mud, and the man was rubbing it around in his eye, and it hurt a lot. But then he took the man over to a pool, and he helped him wash out his eyes. And boy, did he get a surprise then, because for the first time in his life, he could see. And the first thing he saw was the gentle face of Jesus of Nazareth. And for the rest of his life, he would tell everyone who would listen it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. When he came back to his place, people looked at him and said, "Ralph, is that you? What happened?" And he told them, and they didn't believe it. They gathered him up and they took him to the preachers because the preachers wanted to know what happened. And so he explained to the preachers this way, "This man Jesus, I don't know who he was. He told me to trust him. And then he rubbed mud in my eye and it hurt. But he couldn't finish because for the first time he heard again the call of the stellar jay. And he looked up into the sky and he saw it sitting on a branch far above him. The bird was sleek and big, and the same warmth as the sky. He didn't really have an idea about color yet, but he would soon. Color. Now that was a whole new world. He spent the next few days just looking at everything he could possibly look at. He looked at the girls a lot. The word a lot of folks used was pretty, and he agreed. It made some of them uncomfortable. He was going to have to learn about that. He looked at older people, and he was surprised to see that they were wrinkled and a little more bent than the others, but they seemed to have a wisdom and a kindness about them that was good. Plants were green. Animals were mostly brown. First time he saw a camel, he laughed out loud. Couldn't believe how big their feet were. After that, every morning, he awoke to the sound of the stellar jay. And the first thing he remembered was the picture in his head before he could see. And then he remembered the bird when he saw it for the first time. And then last, always last, and most importantly, the gentle, sad eyes of Jesus of Nazareth.